Welcome everybody to Storycraft Conversations, our author interview series for readers who love stories and for the writers who create them. I'm April Bosshard, and I'm a writer and story coach and developmental editor, and I'm here with my co-host, author, writing teacher, and developmental editor, Claire Mulligan. And today we are hosting Marcy Dermansky. Thank you for joining us, Marcy. It's so good to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to talking to you. Marcy is a critically acclaimed novelist. She's the author of 6 novels. I'm going to show you those titles in a moment. Really grateful that we get to spend a bit of a summer Sunday together and talk a bit about writing.
Yeah.
On the novels. And let me just share my screen here. Marcy, critically acclaimed novelist. We're going to talk to Marcy today about finding your voice in the contemporary novel because Marcy has written 6 of them. She's also received fellowships from the MacDowell and the Albee Foundation, and her writings appeared in many illustrious places, including the New York Times, Salon, and the Paris Review. So here are Marcy's 6 novels. Okay, these are amazing novels. The most recent one is Hot Air, and we're going to talk about that. That just came out. But the Hot Air was preceded by Twins, which came first, Bad Marie, The Red Car, Very Nice, Hurricane Girl, and then Hot Air. So they're all just wonderfully funny and unusual and have incredible characters. And I'm just a big fan. I've always been a big fan of Marcy's work since the very beginning. And so I love these novels. I particularly love Hot Air. Its description is a joyfully unhinged story of money, marriage, sex, and revenge. Unspools when a billionaire crashes his hot air balloon into the middle of a post-pandemic first date. Okay, so that's a lot crammed into one sentence, and there's just so much going on in that book. Okay, there we go. And it is, I love this quote too, this review. It is as astonishing as it is blisteringly funny, a delirious, delicious story for our billionaire era. So Marcy has this knack for kind of capturing what's going on in contemporary society and weaving it into quite an original, character-driven novel. And I have to say, Marcy, one of the things that I went through some of the reviews of the different books, and I found these sort of different quotes and certain things stood out to me. And Joyful and Unhinged was one of them. Bad behavior, brilliantly funny, unpredictable, disturbingly comic, wickedly entertaining, wicked, wickedly nihilistic, unpredictable, and funny. So your work really hits people sort of a certain way. And I was wondering if that was something that you were aware of when you first started writing. And like, if you kind of, that you discovered that as you were writing, or if you just knew that was one of your strengths and leaned into it as you wrote.
That's such a great question. And you know what? No, I had no idea. Like, I always kind of know, like, on the surface that, like, a lot of times throughout the course of my existence, people will meet me after having read my work, and they'll almost be disappointed because they're like, you just look so normal. Like, you're so normal. And it's I mean, people don't say that often, but I've absolutely had those words. And it feels like I have like a secret self hidden in. I often feel like what I think isn't what I'm supposed to say. And I don't say it because I'm very kind of cautious about not wanting to offend people or just not wanting to have conflict. So I keep my thoughts to myself, but then I just write, and I'll just write anything. My first reader, whenever I write, sometimes I know people write for certain audiences, and I know Elizabeth Gilbert once talked about writing a book, and she thought about her best friend while she wrote. And it was really interesting. And I think, well, when I'm writing, it sounds so selfish and strange, but I've said it before, I'm really writing for myself, and I'm really just entertaining myself, and I'm pleasing myself. Like, it's a long process because you write too. Writing a novel takes a lot of time, like years. And so if I'm not enjoying the work, it doesn't work for me. And so that's what I'm thinking. And it just turns out sometimes in conversation, I don't consider myself to be like funny. Like, I don't try to be funny. Like, if someone said, knock, knock, Marcy, tell me a joke, I don't have jokes at all. My older brother is a stand-up comic. But one thing it turns out, like with all of my work and all of my books, they're always funny. And I think that I'm always writing about serious subjects in my mind. Like I'm not trying to
Yeah.
write a funny book, but they just come out that way. And to me, it's really interesting for me with writing that there's just so much that I can't control, and I don't try to control. I just see what's going to happen.
So on the one hand, writing a book gives you an opportunity to say the things you wouldn't necessarily say out loud,
I think
but
so, for
also
sure.
kind of opens a channel to just let whatever wants to come through come through. Because we had talked briefly before about how that you don't tend to outline your books.
Yeah, exactly. Like I
Yeah,
don't outline my books at all because I think if I have tried that absolutely, and I feel like if I have an outline, I don't want to write what comes next, is which I said in the outline. Like it just feels dull and flat. So outlines, they just really confound me because I don't want to do what I put on the page. And outlining, I mean, I know some writers you could spend hours or weeks. You could spend a lot of time on an outline, and then for me, I don't want to use it. And I
mm-hmm.
often sometimes have writers who send me their outlines, and I'm like, well, I don't want to read your outline. And it really bothers people, but I'm like, I can't really focus on it. It's not really your story. And if it's not in sentences, if it's not in the words, it's going to work for you. But I can't even really concentrate on somebody else's outline. I don't have ADHD. I don't know, but outlines just
Mm-hmm.
aren't useful for me. But one thing I always think about when it comes to writing, and I love other writer interviews, and I love reading them, and I love hearing about process. And it's always just so interesting to me that they're almost never the same. Like everybody's process is different. And so I would never want somebody to like listen to me and say, "Oh, Marcy doesn't like to outline. I'm not going to outline." I, because it might work for somebody else. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like I have a lot to offer what does work for me. Like I also don't want to say, don't listen to me because you might be different. Like it's both. Like totally listen to me, but also pick and choose because I feel like writing is a very personal process.
Yeah,
And
you
I
have to.
feel like because I went to graduate school, I feel like sometimes writing teachers can just be like magic and they can just make you want to write. I love that really when I'm in a class and I just want to go home and write because it just feels so exciting. And sometimes you can just go to a class with a writer and you just want to go home and like bury your head in the sand. Like not
Mhm.
every professor's words are going to work for you or a writing teacher. And you know what I mean? And so I always just feel like this might always, I would always go with the one that feels the best, like the easiest. I actually believe that writing is hard. It's like super hard. And so I would always want to take the writing advice that seems the easiest and most natural. Like sometimes people think it's got to be about struggle. And sometimes, I mean, I sometimes with a writing question, April, I might just go anywhere and everywhere. And that's why I didn't want to talk in advance. So if I'm going way off topic, you just say, wait, we're going to talk about that later.
Okay.
But so, I know writers, they spend like 10 years working on a book or longer. Or they'll write 8 drafts or 10 drafts. And I'm just like, wow, that sounds awful to me. It's just so hard. Like whenever I do rewrite from one draft to another, then you have the game of like, what did I write before? And you forget this detail and you want to do this. And so too, I mean, I never don't feel like my writing is work. And we can talk about that draft later. But I just feel like if something comes out really fast and easy, it's actually going to probably be really good. And then I don't even always value my work because I'm like, oh, I wrote that in a month, but that's great. You know what I mean? And so outlines don't work for me because I feel like then I know what's going to happen. And if I know what's going to happen, then my brain doesn't have to tell me while I'm writing. And that's what I want. I want to be surprised. My plots surprise me a lot. And then I know what's going to happen. Eventually, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get there. Like I have some
Yeah.
control over my work. Like I kind of know at the end, oh, I want it to be like this, but I don't know how it's going to get there.
Yeah, and you want to be surprised along the way. I actually
Yeah.
have a question about that quality of surprise in
Right.
writing. But I loved what you said too about writing, writing for yourself first,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
otherwise too many things get in the way, and
Yeah.
also having it feel fun or having it feel
Mm-hmm.
easy. And
Yeah.
so would you say that those two things, sort of writing for yourself first and then also allowing there to be a sense of fun and freedom and surprise, is a part of the writing path of just finding your own voice or discovering it? Like it do those kinds of qualities of being with your work facilitate something natural emerging, a natural style?
For myself or for other people? Or,
Well, for yourself, and I'll ask you about for others later. But
yeah.
it seems like that you give yourself the freedom to say what you want to say it for yourself first,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
say it with a sense of surprise. That
Yeah.
to me seems to fit with how your novels end up. They're
Yeah.
sort of,
Okay, so I thought of a perfect. So Hot Air, which is my most recent novel, it has it's multiple points of view,
yeah,
and that's a really fun way to write it. Some of my books are. This is my third novel that plays around with multiple point of view. But in terms of not having an outline, when I started this book, I didn't know that it was going to be that way. And this book, the first chapter of Hot Air, was literally like what I wrote to be a short story, and then I let it sit for a long time. And so when I went back to it and I started to write again, I knew I wanted to develop the story, but I also didn't. I just wanted it. I had taken like a long time in between the story and turning it back on. I just went into a different point of view. So I started this book with a character named Joni,
yeah,
and then the next character when I started to write was Johnny. And I didn't know there was going to be a Johnny. So that was, well, I knew there was a Johnny because her date was with Johnny. So absolutely. But
yeah.
I didn't know I was going to write about him. You know what I mean? But I was like, oh, I'm going to do a new point of view. I'm going to write about Johnny. And that's fun. Like, you know what I mean? So I didn't know when I sat down to write this book that I was going to write a multiple point of view kind of book. And so that was a surprise to me. And I don't almost know, like, why would anybody sit down and think, I'm going to write a multiple POV kind of book? I don't know. Maybe people do. Do you do
Yeah.
something like that when you work? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a doorway in. Like, oh, maybe I'll
Yeah.
try a multiple point of view and see where it
Yeah.
leads. But I don't know that it defines what you end up with. But
Right.
we talked before too about how you don't generally like to work from writing prompts, or you don't do writing prompts. But in this
Yeah.
case of Hot Air, it
Yeah.
started with a writing prompt, and then it became a
Mhm.
short story, and then it became
Yeah.
something else. So it had sort of an unusual genesis, let's
Yeah.
say. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question, like, how do you, at what point did you know you had a novel? Like, how do you take an idea or get an idea or prompt or a short story and say, oh, I can turn this into a novel? What is
Yeah.
that process for you?
It's a difficult process for me. And I feel like I think about it. If I were to go and answer every question about every novel, they've all started differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about novels versus short stories. Novels are such a time commitment that you're like, am I going to want to live with this for a long time? And so I'll talk about with the most recent book. I did start this from a writing prompt. I was in a place where I didn't know what I wanted to write, which I hate. And I always have that after I finish a book. I always have to be like, well, what am I going to write next? And it's the terrible period of time before I start the next novel. And so I literally have a friend who has a Substack. Everybody has Substacks now. It's a new thing. And in this one Substack, she kind of gave writing prompts for a friend. A friend wrote and said, I'm having trouble starting something. And so she gave like six writing prompts. And I was like, oh, whatever. And the writing prompt really was like, write about a first date that gets interrupted by a hot air balloon falling into the date. I would have never thought of that. And I never thought, by the way, that that was going to be a novel. Never, ever. And so I wrote this short story and it came out, it was really fun. Like I knew it was fun when I was writing and it came out well. And it was a short story. And every once in a while, I still have that hope. I think we all have this dream, or so many writers do. It's like one of my unfulfilled, but I'm not even going to call it like a bucket list dream because I don't believe it will ever happen. But the idea of publishing a short story in the New Yorker, I would just love that. And I don't think it will ever happen, and I'm fine with that. But I sent it to my agent, and he loved the story, and he sent it to the New Yorker, and it got rejected. And that was not a surprise, but it got a nice note. It got a nice little note, which I've had before. But a note means nothing, except it makes you feel a little better. But anyhow, my agent's like, you should turn this into a novel. And I didn't want to. I was like, no, this was just a joke. This was from a writing prompt, and it's really silly. And it just doesn't interest me. This doesn't feel like a novel. And then I started some other things and nothing was really working. I was actually in a really stuck place, which I hate. And that's part of being a writer for me is terrible periods. But a friend invited me. She was new to the town that I live in, which is called Montclair, New Jersey. And she was new to town and she was like, had a great big house. And I think this house 100% affected this book. Like I would call it a mansion. And she invited two friends over. And the plan was we were going to come over and we were going to write for 2 hours and then we were going to have lunch. So fun, like the funnest thing. And I wasn't working on anything. And I know what I'm like when I'm not working on anything. I just sort of sit there and I go blah, blah, blah. And I waste 2 hours. And I just really felt really important to me that I had to be working on something to sit in her house. And I didn't even want to come up with the idea. I was like, oh, well, my agent is really smart. I've been with my agent my whole career since Twins. I've been with him since 2005, and he wanted me to turn this into a novel. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work on this novel at her house, like, and then I'm going to see what happens. So I really did, after taking almost a whole year of a break, I wrote the first draft of this novel in 3 months. And
Wow.
yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, my books aren't long. They're always usually under 200, around 200 pages, but this was the fastest I ever wrote a draft of a novel. And so that was just, and I think it was, to me, honestly, this book was really, really silly. And then later, when I go back and I reread it, I'm like, oh, it's not as silly as I thought it was. Like it seems silly, but and there's a billionaire, billionaires, blah blah. I hate billionaires. I hate Jeff Bezos' wedding this week. I mean, billionaires are awful, but it seems so silly. And then when I went and I read it, I was like, oh, Joni, the single mother writer, like I give her a lot of my experience and I put it in the book. And there's like Vivian's an assistant, and it's a lot about being around rich people, and it's about dating, and it's not as silly as it seems.
No,
Yeah.
it's all your novels they're quirky and wonderful and witty, but they're so insightful about
Thank you.
people's needs and their desires and their
Yeah.
motivations. You know,
I think I love that's one of the things I love the most about writing, and it can be in first person or it can be in third person, it doesn't matter to me, is I really love to go into people's heads and I love to tell you what they're thinking. And that's why like I would never write a screenplay, because with screenplays you're supposed to do 99% dialogue. So I can't do that. I don't know. Yeah.
although I think at least in one of your books, if not two, somebody's a screenwriter or was.
Sure.
Yeah,
It's a tricky thing. All writers, I get embarrassed. I once used to teach at Gotham Writers in New York City, and they kind of had a list for instructors. And I don't really consider myself a writing instructor. I'm not a professor, but I have taught. One of the lists was never make your characters writers, like things not to do. I was like, what? I make so many of my characters writers. It's just like there's also the idea of write what you know, and I mean,
yeah.
I'm a writer. I know about writers. So I think in Hurricane Girl, I just made her into a screenwriter. Like that was just ridiculous. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, why not? Yeah.
But I know I have a pet peeve about so many people so many writers, I know what they're thinking when they think, oh, I don't want to write about another writer. So what they'll do is there's so many good novels, but there's so many novels that are about painters.
And it's just, or it's advertising executives or, marketing for,
And suddenly I'm reading all this stuff about the painting process and this and that, but it always feels a little bit disingenuous to me. Like I always just feel like there's a writer who wants to write a book about somebody who doesn't want to write about writing. And I wish I was like I had a really cool, like, weird career and I could just write about biotech. You know what I mean? But about some strange. If I was a beekeeper, I would write a great book about bees. No, somebody I know, a friend just had a bee infestation in her house. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen, and I feel like I need to learn some more. I've never written a novel that requires research. It really doesn't appeal to me, but I feel like it could be useful in terms of giving a correct character something to do that's not writing.
I just want to insert something here just to remind people who are listening that you can pop questions in the chat. I think there are a lot of writers, a lot of potential novelists here too, might have some questions. So by all means, pop your questions in the chat for Marcy at the end of the call, and Claire will collect them. And then let's come back to that, because you've touched on that, write what you know, and I was thinking about your work and how they're all pretty much set in contemporary settings, and you're writing about the time that when you're writing the book, or pretty close to it, and they tend to take place in the United States. I mean, Bad Marie has like a jaunt to Paris and Mexico, which I love. So how do you take that advice of write what you know, or write what you don't know about what you know? Like that element of autobiography, you touched on it a little bit. Could you just expand a little bit more about how, do you think about that, or does it just kind of leak out in the work?
It just kind of leaks out in the work, absolutely. And I'm always really surprised that something that happened to me 10 years ago or something, or 20 years, will suddenly come out in the work that I'm not expecting to do. You know what I mean? Like I'm always writing preposterous situations that don't happen. Like I wrote about a hot air balloon, and I don't know about hot air balloons. I feel like we should never be limited. Like I feel like we can always go anywhere we want, and we don't have to worry about budget or. And with Bad Marie, when I did write about France, I really haven't. I've traveled, but I haven't spent a ton of time in France. And at a certain point, I had the characters go to the Eiffel Tower, and I didn't know what was what. I actually went into Google and I just looked at pictures, and I found a Ferris wheel near the Eiffel Tower, and I put it in my book. And so that was research that I didn't go to Paris to do. I literally just went into like Google Maps or something like that, and so that was good. But
Yeah.
I feel like we can write about things we don't know, and I think that's great. Like I think we should. Like I just feel like you haven't. I mean, I read it on a computer, but basically we have a blank page and we can do whatever we want because
Mhm.
it's free in a weird way. So I don't want that to be limiting, but at the same time, if you wrote a book and you knew absolutely nothing about it, that wouldn't really fly that well too.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, it's a fine balance. Well, you
yeah,
said you've written about writers. You
yeah.
haven't yet written about a painter. I know you
No,
have
I
a
don't think I'm going to.
disdain for that, but you do paint as well. So,
Yeah,
right, you as a hobby, or
it's
have
a hobby. I've sold some paintings,
you
which is
sold some?
fun.
Yeah. So,
I don't try to sell my paintings. I think with social media, it's a funny thing. Like sometimes as an author, I always keep a page and I keep it moving a little bit, and I don't only just want to post about my work, like buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. That's like
yeah.
relentless. And I make these paintings and they really please me, and so I'll just post them. And to me in this weird world of social media, and I think there's been scientific studies about dopamine and getting likes. It's embarrassing. I totally like getting likes. Like sometimes there's just days where I can post a painting and I'll just get so many likes and people will say pretty. It doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't change things, but I definitely enjoy it. And sometimes really the main way I've ever sold paintings is I just post them on Instagram or on Facebook and people buy them. And that's fun.
Mhm.
And I haven't I recently there's somebody in the town of Montclair and they have this thing that's very cute. They have a tiny gallery. Have you heard
Mhm.
of like free libraries? Like the little
Yes.
I love free libraries. This woman in Montclair started a tiny gallery that they're literally as small as free libraries, but they have paintings, like 2 inch by 2 inch paintings, and they're
Oh,
for
wow.
sale. And people have like even told the person who has the free library actually said, 4 different people told me I should give you a show. And we've been in conversation and she said she was going to give me a show and I want to have a show, but I haven't gotten my act together to make paintings enough at the same size to do it because I've been writing or whatever. But I think at one point I have an opportunity to have a gallery show at a free little library and I'm gonna do it. But I don't consider myself a painter and I don't yeah.
Do you
So
find that painting process helps your writing though? Do the two
I
practices
don't
kind
know.
of feed each other?
I don't think they feed each other. I think I
No.
just enjoy it. Like,
Hmm.
and I think that's a big thing. You know what I mean? I think that I feel like writing is really for me full of stress. Like sometimes I love writing. I
Yeah.
do, and I feel like if writing is no fun, there's no point to it. Like sometimes I know so many writers who are like, "Oh, I just wrote for 2 hours. It was agony." And I do know that for myself, whenever I write and it is agony, and I've had those, writing isn't always fun, but that's the time that whatever I write really isn't good. Like if it's agony, I'm not writing well. Painting is just so carefree and easy. Like every once in a while, I'll start a painting and it won't feel good, and I'll stop. There's no stress to it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just all like this is easy, and nice, and then I actually like they're just pretty. I mean, I don't try to
Yeah.
go deep. I don't try to. I don't know. But so I don't think they feed off of each other, but maybe they will one day. Like, or maybe they
Yeah.
do in ways that I don't know. I do know that when I'm painting, I'm not wasting time on the computer or on my phone. I feel like I'm definitely getting something from my head out of it. Like I feel like I'm
Yeah.
really involved and there's something lovely about just like using a watercolor brush and seeing what happens.
There's something really
Yeah.
because I paint a little bit too, and there's
Mhm.
something about the visual, the tactile act and the
Yeah.
visual where you're outside of the abstract of just words or keyboard.
Yeah.
As you said too, even for social media, it's something to
Mhm.
look at, it's something to share.
Yeah.
And if your identity is as a writer and there's less stress around painting, it's almost easier to share. Like what I found was that I could so easily share that work or give it away, but I
Yeah.
couldn't feel that way around writing. And
Yeah.
so that
Absolutely.
taught me something about how I sort of categorize the creativity, perhaps.
Maybe so.
So, but you also, you are a career novelist. You've been doing this,
Yeah.
since 2000, but you've been publishing in novels since 2005. So
Yeah.
this is your job. So that of course carries more weight and sense of
Mhm.
identity and all of that. It's who you are. I had a question for you about that because I would call you're a 21st century novelist. You've been.
I don't think of it, but yeah.
I know. I thought of like that's kind of cool. And you started in 2005. Do you feel like the way you described writing Hot Air or the stress or the hard work or the play? Do you remember 20 years ago writing Twins? Did it feel different to you when you first started out? Has it changed, or even your self-perception as a novelist
It
changed?
definitely has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to graduate school, and then one of the reasons why I went to graduate school literally was because I had a full-time administrative job, and I was starting to earn more and more money. Like I was doing actually pretty well, and I wasn't writing, which I knew I sort of wanted to do, and I just kind of got fed up. I'm like, okay, quit my job, when it got into a graduate program that actually gave me money to go, and I went and I wrote for 2 years, and that was great. And then the crazy thing that happens is then you finish graduate school, and I had to get another job. And so you're like, oh no. And then what did I end up doing? I ended up doing more administrative work. Some people waitress, do you know what I mean? And it's just like
Yeah.
I know how to get jobs in offices, and so suddenly I'm back I'm back working again, and I think I pretty much was working full time, and I was living in New York City then, and I joined a writing space. It was called the Writers' Room, and you could basically go whenever you wanted, and you had a desk, and I worked on this book. Twins, it was twins, and I pretty much for that time that I was writing it was working, and I didn't socialize, like, I mean, at all. I had a boyfriend at the time, but otherwise, I was like, I can't go out. I can't do this. I'm just going to write. Because it's like, if this book doesn't work, if I don't write this book, if I don't sell this book, if I don't make money from this book, I'm going to have to, like, really work. I think I was just so terrified of having to always be like a full time employee that I worked really, really, really hard with that first book.
Mm.
And that is the first novel, and it's about teenagers. Like, it's so, I feel like it's very, if we looked at most writers' careers, it's very much of a coming of age story. And so my first book was a coming of age story and had two point of views. But I really felt like a lot of pressure for myself for that reason. But I also feel that a really good motivator for me as a writer and for other writers, and it's terrible. Like, a self-help book would tell you not to do this, but I feel like fear is like such an important part of writing. Like, if you're not afraid, I mean, if publishing is your goal, if like you want to publish something and sell it and make money, if you're not afraid, it's just gonna slow you back. The woman whose house I wrote Hot Air in lived in a really, really big house, and she had used to be kind of like me, like, had a graduate degree, she wrote two novels, and she married a corporate lawyer. And she still really wanted to write. I think all writers who don't write, in my opinion, all kind of hate themselves or they feel sad. I feel like writers who don't write are really unhappy, and that has nothing to do with getting published. And I also don't believe, and I'll tell this story all the time, you might be an excellent writer and not be published. Like, I feel like that's a bad barometer. But I also feel that the friend who lived in a really, really big house, who had friends come over to write, she said it helped her, it made her go. She didn't have that kind of economic fear because she was comfortable. And that also isn't true, by the way. Like, if you wanted to, like, prove me wrong, you could just, most successful writers at this point, like Taylor Jenkins Reid, they're rich and they're still writing books. So, but in the beginning, right. fear was really important to me. Now I still feel pressure and I fear, but it's slightly, it changed.
Yeah. I had that question, actually. I wasn't sure if it was going to make it on my list, but what motivates you to write? Is it fear or love? And I hear you say you're saying fear, but you also started out our conversation by saying it's also love. Like, what do I want to say? I want to say it for myself. That's a kind of love too.
Like when you were a kid, I always wanted to be a writer. I don't know why. Why did I want to be a writer? But even from, like, I was a little kid, I was a kid in elementary school who was writing the longer short stories and stuff like that. It was just something. It took me a while. Like, I don't think I was an older writer, but I published my first novel when I was 35. And I absolutely wish that I could have started a little bit sooner, that I could have been younger. There actually are all these awards and things, and people just love young writers. But I kind of had to, like, move to San Francisco and bum around. It just took me a little while.
Had to live, yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes, by the way, people go to graduate school straight out of college, and they're like 23, and then I genuinely believe when you're that young, what do you have to write about? Like some people do, like, you know, your childhood, you have tons
Yeah.
of that material, but I do feel like sometimes you really should live before you like go right back into school.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know anybody here who's listening if you had an idea that you wanted to be a writer from the time you were a child. I'd be, pop that in the chat and let us know, because I do also feel like we carry that love and that longing, or often early on. Sometimes it comes later, and it's always there with us. So if you have an urge to write, there's probably a reason for that. And I hear you saying that too. Like, you don't have to. You might be an excellent writer, but you're not published. Those two things don't necessarily go together
No,
all the
it would
time.
be terrible to not write because of that reason. I feel
Yeah.
like, but this writing is great, and I mean, I think most people who are writers are also big readers. I think it's very rare when that doesn't go hand in hand, and so
Yeah.
I mean, I just loved and loved and loved to read when I was a kid, and I don't think that's always true for everybody. Like, I think some people might turn out to be writers who aren't avid readers as kids, but I also think
Yes.
it's probably really common.
Do you have any favorite authors from your childhood that
From childhood,
influenced?
they're so cliche. The books that I love, it's not cliche,
Yeah.
but I mean, they're beloved books. Like, I
Yeah.
love Little Women, and I read it over and over and over.
Yes.
I read
Yeah.
all of the Anne of Green Gables books.
Yep.
Loved all of that probably. Read them all. I loved like The Secret Princess and The Secret Garden by Frances Hodges Burnett. Like those books were just everything to me, kind of. Yeah, and I like those series of books. I reread things. Like my mom said, this is a little weird. I would just reread books over and over, and I would just pick them up from the middle and start to read and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, those stories were introductions to that magical world of,
Yeah, I think so.
of the imagination and of worlds behind the words. And so I think that, yeah, we have that love early on, and then we kind of want to make it too. And
Yeah, right.
that's a long road
Yeah.
to learn how to be the magician too behind this.
Yeah.
Speaking of reading, we've been reading. Would you care to read a little passage
Yeah, we
from
should
your
do it now.
new book?
Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay.
That'd be great. Yeah.
All right. Oh wait. There's a cat in the background. Can anybody
Let's see.
it?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Your
That's
orange,
Sunshine.
your marmalade cat.
Yeah. I had two cats in my novel, twins, and they were
Yep.
really based, not twins and Hurricane Girl. They were based on my cats, Sunshine and Ginger. And so,
Is that Ginger?
that's Sunshine.
That's Sunshine.
Yeah, Ginger actually died about a year and a half ago.
Aw.
But now we have a new kitten named Spencer. So
Okay.
yeah.
Sunshine and Spencer. Okay.
Yeah. And Spencer probably won't show up unless if anybody wanted to see. I'm just so pathetic because I do love my cats. I could shake my treat bag for the cats at the end of this, and Spencer.
And then they'll come. They'll come running.
For treats. Yeah, that's what it does. I think she lives for treats. Yeah, she likes them a lot. Okay.
Okay.
So I thought I would just read the beginning of Hot Air, and then it's just so easy. I don't have to tell you anything because it's the beginning of the book. So
yes, and everybody go and buy it and read the rest of it. It's quite a romp. It's great.
Thank you. One thing people have told me about this book is that this book was that kind of coincided or was published after the presidential election in America, which depressed people so much. And people have just told me that this book is just like an incredible distraction from like awful news in the world, that they read this book and it makes them happy. And that makes me happy.
Yeah.
I love it when people write to me. Fan mail, by the way, it's just like the best.
Okay, we're gonna give out your email today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but it's just like sometimes people wonder, should I write a writer, should I not write a writer? We go, I just like it. It makes me feel good. Okay. The Hot Air. Maybe I don't feel like reading. Okay, here we go. Hot Air. Jody was not certain how the date was going. She had not been on a date for a very long time, not since her divorce 7 years ago. And then, of course, not during her 10 years of marriage. She'd never been on a proper date with her ex-husband, even when they were married. He had just sort of worn her down, so clearly in love with her. And that was a big chunk of her life, her marriage. Years and years of her life stolen, not only the opportunity to date, but to lead her life, to spend her days the way she would have liked, instead of always trying to placate someone else. She did, of course, at least have a marvelous child, Lucy. So she was on a date. Jody not met him on an app, but in real life at a block party on a very fancy block around the corner from her not so fancy apartment. Her daughter had a friend who lived on this block. At the party, Jody had gotten pleasantly drunk and accepted a hit from a joint, even though she did not like to smoke pot, because she figured, why not? Some people made friends through their dogs. Jody met people through her daughter. The man she'd met had a son the same age as her daughter, and her daughter said this boy wasn't awful. Johnny texted her the next day asking her out, And when Joni replied that she did not have a babysitter, he wrote back that she should come to his house, bring her daughter, and the kids could watch a movie in the basement. He promised a nice meal, and Joni loved free dinners. Nothing, of course, could ever happen between them because of their names, Johnny and Joni. Should I read a little more?
Sure, please.
Okay, yeah, that's not very long. Joni realized very quickly that she was not attracted to Johnny. He was not unattractive. He was attractive even. He had money too, which was important after being married for so long to a man who did not. He liked good movies. He read books. He made her dinner. She knew, however, that she was not attracted to him because after the meal he had kissed her. They'd gone outside to watch the sunset. The sky had turned pink. The light sparkled over the lawn onto the swimming pool that Joni did not know he had. She returned the kiss. It started out fine, and then became unpleasant, oppressive even, with Johnny's tongue in her mouth, his arms wrapped around her so tightly that it was difficult to extricate herself. It was a kiss that did not end. Joni was realizing that she would have to forcibly end this kiss because she would soon require oxygen when a hot air balloon came veering down towards Johnny's very large backyard. Holy fuck, Johnny yelled, letting her go, looking up at the sky while Joni gulped for air. The hot air balloon was heading straight for the swimming pool. It was crazy. Joni decided she was never going to kiss this man Johnny again. This made her sad because during the meal she'd begun to imagine their life together and already had come crashing down like a hot air balloon. She'd thought about the flowers she would paint in the yard, the coffee she would drink in the morning, sitting outside in one of the Adirondack chairs beneath the oak tree. The basement had a fully equipped playroom with a floor to ceiling movie screen. She would be a stepmother, which was tricky, but how hard could that be? It would be nice to have a playmate for her daughter, but now she would never find out. There was a man and a woman in the basket of a hot air balloon careening from the sky, and they were screaming, not out of fear, but in anger. They seemed to hate each other. They were all dressed up. Make way, we're coming down. I will kill you if we don't die. That was startling, to say the least. They're going to land in the pool, Johnny said. He and Joni ran for the pool, but the hot air balloon landed on the lawn, right at the edge of the pool. Thank God, Joni yelled. We're okay, the man yelled. And then the air balloon tipped over, falling into the pool with a poignant splash. The man went under head first. Joni watched the bottoms of his leather shoes go under last. She had never seen anything like this. Joni was grateful not to be kissing Johnny anymore, and a man had fallen into the pool and needed saving. Joni dove in. It was mid-May. The water was cold. She grabbed the man, putting her arms around his chest, and brought him up to the surface, kicking with her legs. And there, at the end of the pool, was Johnny and the woman in an evening gown, who had somehow climbed out of the basket onto dry land, and they were helping her pull out the man out of the water. He began spouting water, not dead, not in need of CPR, which was a relief because Joni did not know how to give CPR. He was wearing a tuxedo. Joni pulled herself out of the pool on her own, while Johnny and the woman from the hot air balloon tended to the not drowned man. Joni could not believe how alive she felt. She felt amazing. She'd saved a man's life. She had jumped into cold water. It was a tremendous combination. She could feel the grin on her face. She saw Johnny looking up at her, and her smile extended to him. Maybe she would try kissing him again. Maybe she'd been wrong. That was incredible, she said. Joni wondered about her daughter, wondered if she had seen the hot air balloon go into the pool, but the kids were in the windowless basement watching the third Harry Potter movie. And I'll sit there.
Okay.
Okay.
Out there. That's great. That's so much is happening in those initial paragraphs and pages that is, again, unusual, unpredictable, full of surprise. Thank you so much for reading. It's always such a pleasure to hear it in the author's voice too. I wanted to just note, just for the craft side of things, just how deftly you move between what's happening on the outside and what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
You know, we talked earlier about you wouldn't ever want to write a screenplay because yes, everything's on the outside, everything's visual. Yeah. How when you are like, where do you feel anchored in an opening like that, in a story like that, in terms of inside outside? Like, how do you navigate between those
I mean, if I tried, like, honestly,
two? If
that's
you
so
tried thinking
smart.
about it, it wouldn't work.
I love getting credit for things. Like, I love having people read my books and telling me what I do. And then I'm like, yes, absolutely, that's what I did. But imagine if you were sitting down writing a paragraph and you thought, okay, I'm going to describe what happened and then I'm going to go into your head and tell it. Like, I think it would paralyze me. And I don't think it, I think it's a really important thing to think about. And I think it's a really good thing to look at in other people's work. But I don't think if I really tried to do that, I think I would just stop.
Okay.
One thing I learned from a writing professor in graduate school, his name is Frederick Barthelme, and he's not so well known anymore, but the Barthelmes used to be huge. But he was really kind of dismissive. He was mean, but basically he was
It was
like,
me.
you got sometimes, but he was like, you gotta tell us everything in the first paragraph. He's like, don't wait till page 3. If it's someone's birthday party, don't tell us. He's like, put it up front. Like, 'cause so many writers, and I think there is definitely a way to layer things and to like move things in. But he's like, if things don't happen right away, why are we going to want to read this? I don't know. And I think that has always stuck with me. And I think things always are going to happen in the first chapter of my books. Like in my novel, Hurricane Girl, it's kind of funny because the hurricane literally happens in the first chapter. Like the woman buys a house and the hurricane comes and her house gets knocked down, like the Three Little Pigs. But like I think I want things to happen fast in a book because I have this one book, and I'm not going to say what it is because it's me, but I bought a book. It was so appealing to me. The storyline was so appealing to me. And I keep picking it up and reading it, and I read the first 2 pages. I think it's probably going to be a really good book. And my eyes glaze over, and I just can't get through the first 2 pages. Actually, sometimes when I listen to audiobooks, by the way, I can always get through something that I can't read if I listen to it. But I think it's
Okay.
really important. I don't want that audiobook trick to work for me. I feel like if
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you want people to just be immediately invested in your story, and that is something I actually do think about. And I don't
Yeah.
necessarily think about it while I'm writing my first draft. I think when it comes to drafting with my books, the beginnings get written over and over and over and over. And then by the time I get to the end, I know who all my characters are. I know what they're, I just know them. The end usually almost doesn't change at all. And the beginning gets worked
Okay.
out a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, the way I really appreciate that about all your novels.
Yeah.
There's a quality of directness
Yeah.
and generosity.
Oh, nice.
You know, that there's like put it on the page, get things going. When you do that, and as a writer,
Yeah.
you take that risk, it
Yeah.
seems like you get to set yourself up for more surprise as well. Like if I just tell them everything now, I'll have to figure out what comes next, and they'll
There
go
you go
along the
too.
ride
Like I'm
for
not
me.
holding anything back. So it's like all
Right.
the time you have to. I love thinking about that. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you can't stop. I mean, I guess. I mean, I have a trouble too. A lot of times, writers, the middles are really hard because you've got everything set up and you know how it wants to end, but you don't want to bore people for 100 pages. You
Yeah.
know, so. But
Right.
I
So,
don't.
well, your books are anything but boring in the middle.
Thank
It's
you.
like they just keep going and going.
Yeah.
I recently reread Bad Marie, which I love because part of it does take place in Paris. Um,
Yeah.
and just going back to the first line, it's just really simple, but you know, sometimes Marie got a little drunk at work.
Yeah.
You know, it's
I
just
think that was always the first sentence, by the way. I
those,
think it was,
yeah. And then it says, you know, she took care of Caitlin, the precocious 2.5-year-old daughter of her friend Ellen Kendall. It was a full-time job. It's, you know, you're laying out the what
yeah.
and the where,
Yeah.
and so that clarity, that directness is really helpful for orienting the reader.
Yeah.
But also, you know, describing Marie, describing Joni, often your characters are the way they think and what they're the situations they're in. It's always feels, you know, it feels a bit odd. Like it's Allison whose house gets blown
Right.
away by a hurricane, and Leah in the red car, her old boss dies and she has to go get this inheritance. um, they're all kind of unusual characters, and I wanted to just ask you a bit about, does the characters, do they come to you first? You know, do you kind of like want to follow them, or is it the situation, or does that
I
change
think
with
the
the book?
situation comes first, honestly, and the
Okay.
characters. Yeah, then the characters. As I figure them out, then I go back in and I make them richer and deeper. Yeah. So I think I just always sort of start with something happening. Like with Bad Marie, she falls asleep in a bathtub. Like I knew that was going to happen, and then I
Mm-hmm.
go back in, and that's why I always have to rework my beginnings because I don't know who they are until this. And I do feel like that sometimes writers say they don't love to write plot, but I feel like plot is so important. And I feel characters always find out who they are by what happens and what they do. And so as a
Mhm.
writer, I learn about my characters when they do things. Like they surprise me, and I'm like, oh, that's what they do. And then
Right, and that's the outer story. That's the outside thing that's
yeah,
happening, and then they have
yeah,
these internal reactions too.
yeah. Like so story and plot really lends to character.
Yeah.
Yeah, they go together.
So I wanted to ask you too about you as you're not a writing teacher, you've taught writing, but you are
Yeah,
an editor and you work with writers,
yeah.
particularly novelists.
Hmm.
So can I just ask you two questions about that, and then we'll just shift
Sure,
to see if there's any questions from the
absolutely.
audience.
Yeah,
But when you work with writers,
yeah.
is there anything in particular that you find that you respond to when it comes to a voice emerging or something kind of unique coming forward? Is
Um,
there anything that you're paying attention to or notice? Not
I just feel like I need to be engaged in the story. And one thing that really matters a lot to me, more so than the voice, is I always really want to believe the characters. I always want to believe that what they're doing, like, yes, they will do that. And I feel like when I read other people's work, if characters do things and I don't believe they'll do it, that always pulls me out of the story. So I'm always like, how can we figure this out and how can we make it work? I feel like the voice usually happens. I've never really said to a writer, oh, this book doesn't have enough voice. Like, I don't know. I think that's just something we all do. I've never actually, or I've never said to someone, I want you to be more voicey. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like,
right.
it's just, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. So and that makes me think maybe I should be doing that as an editor, but I don't think so. I don't think that's how I approach a novel.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a tricky topic line, they're sort of just tossed out, like, okay, finding your voice in the contemporary novel, mostly because you have such a clear one, it's so distinct.
Right.
But what you're saying too is it sounds like if you get other things out of the way, the
Mhm.
voice is just there. And
Yeah.
instead of going out finding it or thinking you have to do all these things to create it, just
Right.
letting go of the things that maybe get in the way.
Yeah.
And from what I hear you say too, is that focusing on the story and telling it
Mhm.
clearly, directly, generously probably is going to pave the way to finding your own unique voice.
Yeah.
You said figuring out like, okay, so believable motivated characters are key. So would you say as an editor you come across that sometimes, like those are sort of the sticking points when you're helping writers, like what are
Yeah,
those
I
problems?
definitely have that. Absolutely. I feel like a lot of times I feel like books don't move fast enough, which is something I talked about right away. Like with the first paragraph,
Yeah.
I'm often having people get the books I want. Always want my writers to have characters moving up. I want the dialogue. Dialogue is really important. I always want to believe it sounds like writers are saying it. And then, I mean, as an editor, I get hung up on funny things. Like, I'm a really strong believer in dialogue tags being as simple as they come. Like, I want it to be he said, she said, maybe sometimes asked, sometimes told. But I never want someone he mumbled, he
Yeah.
exclaimed, he screamed. I'm always cutting that back on writers constantly. I
Yeah,
just
me too
all
when I'm editing.
right.
Okay, but in
Yeah.
this vein, I just have this
Okay.
question for you. This
Okay.
little like dialogue question because I
Yeah.
had you never use contractions.
I know that's a thing. It
What yeah,
really
tell me about
bothers
that
some people.
thing.
I don't know, and now it's something that torments me a little bit because when I write
Right.
things, I don't use contractions, and I guess I want it to sound real, but I feel like a book isn't real. I don't want it to sound too real. It's just like you wouldn't want people to say and huh. You want to
Yes.
try to get out the stuff. So maybe I make that might be a little bit stilted, and for some reason, just with me, I just like it. I feel like it works, and I wouldn't say that everyone should do it. And I've gotten more self-conscious about it, but sometimes when I'm writing, it's always what I tend to do. And so if that's what I'm doing, I feel like that must be right.
So maybe it's something like a bit of classic craft that you have woven into your very, in
Yeah.
idiosyncratic voice. It's sort of an interesting blend. It's something that
I
I
love
notice.
that.
I
Yeah.
fall into and read the novel very easily, but I notice it and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
interesting voice.
It
So
is.
that maybe that's part of, the distinction, part of the
It could
distinction.
be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I want to bring Claire in just to see if
Hey,
there are any kind of questions and any reader questions. I think mostly, it's been, let me just find Claire here too. Mostly people have been listening. You've been saying such
yeah.
wonderful things and sharing amazing things.
Thank
So
you so much. Maybe now is the
I
beginning.
just want to say you are available for for doing editing work if people have a
Absolutely.
novel?
Yeah, I've
Okay.
got a web page, marcydermansky.com, and there's a page devoted to editing and what my process is and stuff like that.
Good.
And anybody can always email me. And, yeah.
Okay, great. And we can write you fan mail.
Fan mail, editing queries, all are good.
Okay,
I sign books.
I'll
Yeah.
have a follow-up with an email to the people who are here, so we'll share that too.
Okay, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, did anything stand out to you, Claire, that you
We have a couple questions. Does anybody else have questions out there? Anything at all that you can think about for Marcy? Just pop them in the chat here. We do have a question from Kat. There's one about structure, but I think you answered that. We're talking about, you don't really outline per se, but do you think about the overall big picture structure though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always thinking about the ending. Like, I feel like if you kind of write too aimlessly, like, I don't believe in outlines, but if you don't have an ending in mind, I feel like one of the biggest dangers for me or for writing is just, it's very easy to just open the computer. Oh, for structure, starting things the next day. Like, I feel like that's the beginning writer mistake, is like, you start a new scene, you might make it the next day, you might even make it like the next hour. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do I get through the next meal? And I feel like you always want to jump ahead in time a little bit. You don't want a novel structure to be the way our days are structured. You want to move through time. And I think you want to be moving towards an ending at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So knowing the end game is indeed a structure, right? Because then
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But it seems more a process of discovery.
Yeah, absolutely, because you don't know what it is. So it's a little bit. That doesn't sound easy, but that's what I recommend. Yeah.
I guess, and this other question here from Kat too is about, I guess it's more like when you're stuck, if you ever get stuck, or maybe you feel overwhelmed with, I mean, sometimes we get stuck, we have no ideas, and other times it's like we got so much, like it's like your brain's like doing.
So I have like one trick, like if I'm really stuck and I'm in a plot and I don't know what to do, and I recommend it. I do this. It's something I've definitely done. It's just introduce a new character. Like, sometimes novels can get so insular and you get really stuck and you've got these three characters and their world is sort of fixed. If you just bring in somebody new, the whole thing just changes and you don't know what's going to happen, and a new character can surprise you. And so that's what one trick I would say to stuck writers is just bring somebody else in, and you weren't planning on them. So yeah,
that's a really good
surprise again.
Yeah,
bring in the element of surprise again.
Surprise. It's like a little clique, right? And then somebody comes in.
I mean, that happens in real life too, right? All of a sudden you mean somebody and your life changes. You know what I mean?
I have a question about humor. Like your novels are funny, like they're kind of droll.
Yeah.
And I love the tone. Like you were like, it's just this. It's funny, but it's really matter of fact as well, which makes it funnier in a way, right? I think it's very understated. Do you go in with that with the idea of humor and how you're going to apply it, or you just think of ridiculous situations and let your characters deal with it?
Except for this hot air balloon. That was a prompt. In general, I don't think, I'm going to start a book with ridiculous situations. I absolutely don't. Do you know what I mean? I think the humor just comes naturally to me. Like, I don't know. I always just feel like if I tried to be funny, I wouldn't be funny. But I feel like I haven't written a book that isn't funny. So I think that's just how I relate to the world, I guess. I think. And I feel like, yeah. But I don't try to be funny. I don't know how does anyone try to be funny? But
it's sort of accidental.
I don't know. I think comedy writers must have a thing. I'm not sure. But I mean, I definitely do feel like there's something about writing where I think you can definitely teach writing and you can learn writing. But I think a lot of it is just what you have to do it yourself, and you have to just be typing and it has to be on the page. And if you're not actually working, it won't come to you. Like, you can plan as much as you want. You can outline, you can take walks. I mean, I definitely get good ideas when I'm swimming. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of times I'll have a good idea. If you go home and you write it down, you might forget it. But I feel like none of it really actually happens until you're actually working. And then you're just like, oh my God, like this character will just say something to you. And you're just like, did they just say that? And it's just so great. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, but I don't plan it. Like, I don't know what they're going to say. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have another book in the works? Are we allowed to ask?
You're allowed to ask, and I am, and I'm kind of struggling with it right now, which is so annoying. So I think I'm not going to talk about it. But I can just say that I've written 6 novels and I'm working on a book and I'm struggling with it. And that's annoying too. Do you know what I mean? Like, when is it ever just going to be like easy and you don't doubt yourself? And I haven't gotten there yet. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we never get there.
I
It's
know.
just
I
not
wish we could
possible.
get there, right? But
Yeah,
no.
right itself.
Yeah,
That
totally.
element of surprise. I had one more question too. We talked about childhood,
Yeah.
favorite childhood books and authors.
Right.
Do you have any any contemporary authors, anybody now that you look to? Well, they could have passed away already, or contemporary,
Right.
but things you read now that are kind of inspiring or
Yeah.
get you out of your head or something.
Right. I mean, I have one writer. I don't know if she's as well known in Canada, or not. Her name is Rufi Thorpe, and her last book actually went really big, and they had others before her. Most recent novel is Margot's Got Money Troubles, and it's going to be an Apple show, and it's really popular. But I loved all of her work. Like, and her novel before that was called The Knockout Queen, and one was called Vera with Love. Anything she writes, I'm gonna read, and she always just like goes into left field. She's always blowing my mind. I'm like, what? And I love when writers do that. I really love the work. I really love Kevin Wilson's writing. He wrote The Family Thing, and he wrote Nowhere to Panic, and some of his books are bestsellers. But they're very gentle novels, and they're very quirky. And he's writing about artists. He's writing about people with social anxiety. He wrote one novel, um, Nothing to See Here, was literally about the 2 twins get a babysitter, and the twins, whenever they get upset, they like burst into fire. Like, they literally burst into flames. And I think he was actually writing about his children who had just like tantrums, but he literally had them light on fire. And I just love that book, and I love his work. And I'm always telling people to read it. And then, I mean, I'm mainly always reading female authors. I love reading contemporary fiction all the time. I just read a book called Ordinary Love, and I forgot her name is Marie, and her last name is a little bit Polish, and I just blanked on it, which is terrible. But there's a new novel called Ordinary Love that just came out a month ago. It's so good. No, it actually came out in June. I could run into my room and get the cover, but that would be a little weird, wouldn't it?
Well, you could run into your room and get the cat treats. And
you want the cat treats? All right.
I have one. Okay, wait.
Yeah.
One more question is
Sure.
you mentioned Murakami, I think.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
One of your favorite authors. And I just had a funny question because I also had read The Red Car recently.
Oh, that was directly inspired.
Was it? So is Yumiko, the character, the secondary character of Yumiko, supposed to be his niece?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
I just had to. It was a guess, so I just wanted to ask you. I get to ask the author.
100%. I think I gave her a really famous author. I love that you knew that. And then, did you know that book was inspired by Murakami? Like,
I didn't know that because I'm not as familiar with all of his work.
Okay, so I'll test. Like, this was you once asked me about prompts, and I don't have like a list of prompts to give authors. But at one point when I was stuck, and this was the Red Car was the only book that I did this way, because I told you all my books start differently. Is I was really stuck and I didn't know what to write, and I decided that I was going to try to write a Murakami novel. And to me, all Murakami novels, not all, but they're always basically based about a young man who is extraordinary, but he thinks he's ordinary, and then crazy things happen to them. And I just thought, well, I'm going to try to write a book like that, and I'm going to make her into a woman, and I'm going to put her in America instead of Japan, and I'm going to try to do a little bit of magical realism. And I went and I reread some of his books again, which I would do anyway. And The Red Car really was me trying to write a Murakami novel. And so I think that's why in that novel, there's a car that literally was like totaled in a car accident that regenerates, not like Christine comes back. And that's the only time in any of my novels where things happen that couldn't actually happen in real life. And
it's true. And the boss speaking to her through her mind, so that like she has someone she's lost. And I love that part of it though. And it was a little different than your other stuff, but I really love those elements. Maybe you'll do that again a little bit.
You know, that's nice. I need to remember if I get into a rut, because I still get into ruts, that I can do different things. And that book is really special to me. So so that was my Murakami novel.
I have a fan letter for you from Matt here from Angela Kenyon. It's okay if I read it out, I think.
Hey, did this just come to you? That's so sweet. Thank you.
She says, Marcy, just wanted to say a great big thank you for your writing, for bringing me to that place where I spent happy hours devouring words since my early childhood. My happiest self lives to read and write fiction. But 2 years ago, after my husband, best friend of more than 40 years, died rather suddenly, I lost my ability to write except poetry and read except poetry. I was unable to sink into a fictional world written by another or create new stories of my own. I signed up for the Zoom just last week. I visited Libby, the public library, and found Bad Marie. Started reading right away and was hooked. I read and read and read until I read the last word. What a joy to find that deep reading, otherworld place again, to love and laugh there. So wonderful. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you for
That's
reading that to
for
me.
all of us.
Oh,
I've
that's
never,
so
I've never had a
wonderful.
letter read to me on camera before.
Is that Angela? Is she still here?
Yeah.
Let's just bring her on for a second.
Does she want that?
I don't know.
Yeah, she's here.
Yeah.
We can even bring everybody on, I guess.
Okay.
For
let's
some
just see if-
reason, I can't video, but
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, we
Oh,
can.
yeah, there. Thank you so much. It's so nice. Yeah, I'm so glad
Oh,
that.
thank
Just
you.
see.
Deep
I'll just look in-
thanks.
Yeah,
I have a mutual friend in common. You guys met in the Dominican, and
I know.
we met in New York in like 2006 or 2007. And
Right.
so it's just been such a pleasure to know you all these years. And we're like not close or not in each other's lives in any real regular way, but I followed your career and I've read your books, and
Yeah.
it's been wonderful to be, following along with your
Yeah.
career. So I'm really excited to see what you do next
I'll keep you posted.
read the next book. So maybe if there's a bunch of readers and writers out here waiting for the next one.
Perfect, absolutely.
Get you unstuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll wrap up. We're good, Claire. And all right. Well, just thank you again for sharing your summer Sunday with us.
I'm so glad you invited me. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
It was a real pleasure, and we'll follow up with an email and some links and links to your website and everything too.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
And,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for everything.
you.
Okay.
Take care,
All right.
Marcy.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.